We have a wonderful story to tell here tonight. It's Jim's story, and it's also the story of 1-800-Flowers, and it's also the story of the evolution of communication technologies. But it does start with a kid from Queens who's put into a family business. I think that's the right place to start. It's going to be really valuable, and it's all based on his book. Talk is Not Cheap. Each of you will receive a copy, and hopefully Jim will stick around to sign them.
Sure.
This book is about something that starts with him at a very young age, in his early formative years as a young person in the working world, and finds constant opportunities to express itself with each decade and with each technological innovation. So Jim, tell us how you got started.
Well, it's a story not unlike Andy and Sam's. That is, I grew up in a family business as well here in Queens. My dad was a painting contractor. And if in our family, if you're old enough to walk, you're old enough to work. So from a very young age, working for Dad. Dad's was a family business too. His dad died at a young age. His mother, my grandmother, back when my father was just out of the Navy, World War II, so maybe 21 years old. His dad passes away. He's got 2 younger brothers. And there was no social safety net then. So my grandmother, how do I make a living? So she made believe my father was in charge of the painting business and kept it going. And eventually it became true that my father ran the business, but back in his earliest days, I think 20 years old literally he started, she made believe he was in charge. So I grew up in that environment. Now, unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be a good family business environment because you have 3 brothers close in age. It just wasn't a big enough business to feed 4 families the way that they wanted to live. And so there was early tension there, and it manifests itself to be a bad family situation. But I learned a lot, and I enjoyed being in a family business. But my father clearly, like you, Andy, did not want me to be in the painting business, certainly not in a family painting business. Thought it was too tough an industry. I, too, like Andy and Gus, are looking for the easy business. Have not yet found it, but I suspect here tonight that you will all turn us on to what the easy business is. Each of yours, I'm sure, is easier than anyone could ever have imagined. But so I thought in the neighborhood I grew up in Queens, which was South Ozone Park. It's between Aqueduct Racetrack and Kennedy Airport. We didn't have a lot of entrepreneurial role models there. We had people who were civil servants, lots of them, cops and firemen and sanitation workers, easy to understand what they did. We had merchants who ran shops in our neighborhood, could figure that out, retail, that was pretty easy to understand. Then you had some guys who would put suits on and take the train into the city and do something in an office, but we could never figure out what that was. I corrected, there was one entrepreneurial role model who was just down the block from me for a number of years. His name was John Gotti. But my father strongly encouraged us not to follow in his footsteps. He said the retirement program was not very good at all. So if you saw the movie Goodfellas, that was my neighborhood. We knew all of those characters. Not a good thing, but we knew all of those characters. So thought I'd be a policeman. And being an Irish Catholic kid from South Queens, there is a genetic requirement, and that genetic requirement is that you tend bar. And so I'm working as a bartender in a local place in Richmond Hill. And one of my customers, who's a friend, works at a home for boys, a group home for boys in Queens. And every time he's in, I'm asking him about it. So finally one night he challenges me and says, you seem like you'd really be interested in this. Do you think you'd like to give it a try? I said, geez, Bob, I'm not really sure. So he said, why don't you come have dinner with us some night? So I did. I drive down to Far Rockaway, a very, very tough neighborhood at that time. Still not a lot better, but a very tough neighborhood, across the street from the worst projects in New York City, believe it or not, in Far Rockaway. So I have dinner. I have 10 teenage boys in a 2-story brick house. And we have dinner, and afterwards Bob grabs me downstairs. We're sitting in his office, and he says, do you think you'd like to give this work a try? I said, you know what, I think I would, Bob. And he tossed me the keys and said, okay, you're on duty tonight. And he left. And it's me and these 10 guys. Now the oldest of the guys, they were 16 to 20 years old. I was only a few months older than the oldest guy in the house. And that began a 14-year career, which frankly had a dramatic influence on my life, on my person, on what I understood about people, what I came to learn about people, and it was extremely rewarding and gratifying. Even though I was horrible at it in the beginning, it changed everything about me. The only way it wasn't rewarding as a career was working in the not-for-profit social work world. You starve. And I made some life decisions that change your bandwidth for risk tolerance, which is I married very young, and Mary Lou and I started a family very young. And these kids, they wanted to do some really crazy things. They wanted to have clothes, and they wanted to have food, and they wanted to go to school. So a few years, I live in a home for a couple of years, and I run the home, then I run all the homes, and then I run the main home, which it was down in Rockaway Beach, had 175 boys in it, staff of 300, and a couple of beachfront blocks in Rockaway Beach. But that's at a very young age, and so I'm the administrator of the home, or one of the administrators, and I'm making more money, but you still starve. But it's not it's not a 24/7 job like when I lived in the group homes. This is a Monday through Friday kind of job. Some exceptions, when there's a big criminal activity of some kind or other fun activity on the weekend, you get called in. But so I'm back to my roots. I'm working Friday and Saturday nights at a bar on First Avenue to try and supplement my income. On the side, I'm buying houses and fixing them up and renting them out because I learned how to do all that stuff working for my dad all those years. And one of my customers, a Greek American who will call scotch and soda at that bar, tells me that he has this flower shop across the street, which of course I knew, but he was going to be selling it. He had a new scheme, a new business he was going to go pursue. And so I said to him, do you mind if I come work there a couple of Saturday afternoons before I come to the bar? He said, why would you do that? I said, well, maybe I'm a buyer. So I did that, and I liked it. I liked how you interacted with people, celebratory moments in their lives. Customers were nice. It was a Upper East Side, between 62nd and 63rd Street on First Avenue. It was a cool neighborhood. It was Restaurant Row in those days. This is pretty nice. In my old neighborhood, there was a Greek fellow who had a flower shop in Richmond Hill. And it was on the main corner across the street from the big funeral home. Seemed like he was very successful. I think I can understand this business. And there was no McDonald's in the business yet. There was no big player that had taken over the industry. It was all mom and pop shops. So I thought, maybe I can build a business here. So I scraped together $10,000 from the sale of a house I just sold in Woodhaven, Queens, that I had built, refurbished and sold. And I took the proceeds, gave $10,000 to this fellow and bought the flower shop. Again, the intention was not to be a florist, although I obviously became a florist and loved that part of it, but the intention was to build a business. And it was one of the ones I could afford to get into. It was understandable, and it hadn't had a big national organized player yet in the category. So I bought that shop, and I kept my full-time job because I needed to still pay the mortgage and provide for my family, which was now 3 kids, or soon to be 3 kids, and made this my soon to be full-time work. I kept my full-time job at St. John's for 8 years. 2 more years I was part-time there, and then after 10 years I changed the name of the company from Flora Plenty, which is the name we made up, to 1-800-Flowers. But every 6 months I'd open up another flower shop. Everything I could plow back in. So I just worked like a crazy person. 7 days a week. I'd finish at St. John's at 5 or 6 in the afternoon. I'd drive into the city, run my shop till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We were 7-day-a-week operation. I decided 24-hour-a-day operation would be really good because no one else is doing that. Well, answer the phone 24 hours a day. I didn't bother to do anything silly like hire staff to do that. So you'll understand why I'm married for 40 years, because I found a woman who was saintly, understanding, and really good at taking orders at 3 o'clock in the morning on the phone. So I'd leave the shop at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I'd call home and say, okay, transferring the phones. So Mary Lou with 3 kids around the house, the phone would ring, she'd listen for the click, know that it was the phone being transferred. We had order pads by each phone in the house, and until I got home an hour or so later, she was the phone service. Then I was on duty for the rest of the night. You'd be surprised how many people who were either highly intoxicated, or worked for the post office, needed flowers at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was good training for when I had teenagers to be able to sound like I wasn't asleep when I answered the phone at 2:30 in the morning. But we did that then, for 10 years until I left St. John's and made the Flora Plenty, now soon to be called 1-800-Flowers, my full-time.